Okay, welcome to the next learner training video. This one deals with weak forms in pronunciation. Now remember, from the previous video on pronunciation, we looked at individual sounds, and I said if you can't say those individual sounds, you will find it difficult to hear them. The same applies here. If you can't reproduce these weak forms when you're speaking, you will find it difficult to hear them, and therefore you will make some mistakes in your listening exam. So this applies not just for speaking, but for listening as well. Okay, so what are weak forms? Students from languages that are syllable timed, this is extremely important for you to listen. But what is a syllable? Let's start with that first of all. If I say the sentence, he looks happy, how many syllables are in that sentence? Got the answer? If you don't know how to work it out, close your mouth and try to say that sentence. He looks happy. Close your mouth. How many times did I mumble? 1, 2, 3, 4. He looks happy. He looks happy. Okay, so that's the easiest way to check how many syllables there are in a sentence. And knowing what a syllable is going to be very important in this lesson. Okay, so weak forms. What I'm going to show you is a sentence. Well, I'm going to make you listen to a sentence from Longman, and the sentence is here. No, it's here. Okay. So I've deliberately chosen this phrase or this grammar, going to do something. So listen to this sentence here.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Listen again.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Now, did you notice that some of these syllables were shorter? So let's first of all count how many syllables there are in this sentence. If I say the sentence out but closing my mouth, I can count. So 10 syllables. He looked as if he was going, 2 syllables in this one word, to cry. Notice it's not looked, it's looked. So it's only 1 syllable, even though if you're from Spain you might say looked, or Italy as well. Okay, so there's 10 syllables in there. However, some of those syllables are shorter than others. Now, can you work out which ones they were? Listen again and try to work out which of these sentences, syllables, were shorter.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Do you notice anything? Let's zoom back up again. Now, let's start with which of these words in this sentence are if they are left independently on the page, they would have no meaning at all. So if I just put the word, let's do one as an example. Let's take this word as. If I put as on a page and said, okay, what do you think? Well, it means nothing, right? But if I put the word look on the page, okay, and this image is formed in your mind. Somebody using a magnifying glass, somebody watching with binoculars, somebody looking at a TV. Okay, so some of these words have no meaning by themselves and some of them do. Only 2 of these words really have that meaning, have a deep meaning inside, and that is looked and cry. You might say that going in this case has meaning, but I'm going to show you why it doesn't. Okay, so it's only looked and cry. He and he, yes, to a certain extent, they have some form of meaning because they relate to, say, a boy called Samuel. But essentially we're focusing on looked and cry in this case. And these, all of these, especially as, if, was, and to, are what we call grammar words. They have no meaning by themselves. And these grammar words are the ones that get squashed up. So listen again.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Okay, do you notice? Now, before we move on, I just want to highlight something here with the word gonna. If I say this sentence out in a more formal context, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be easy.
This isn't going to be easy.
Okay, so gonna is a shortened version of going to. However, look here, it says spoken informal. Okay, it's only in spoken English and only in informal languages, in informal situations, sorry. So do not use this word gonna, certainly not in spelling. It's not acceptable in IELTS to use it in spelling. It's okay if you're texting somebody, but not in IELTS. And don't use it in the speaking as well, because it's a formal situation, IELTS exam. This is only for informal. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is to listen to the same sentence, but it's going to be spoken out by Google's text-to-speech engine. It's a computer engine. Let's see if Google's text-to-speech engine also works out what are the weak forms and what are the stressed words. So let's listen.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
That's pretty good. Google has got much better. I remember the first time Microsoft, brought out a text-to-speech engine, which, by the way, Stephen Hawking still used to use when he was still alive, that famous scientist who was stuck in a wheelchair. He used to use the old style, which was they couldn't squash sentences together or syllables together, and it sounded very robotic. Okay, listen again.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Going to cry. Looked as if he was going to cry. Okay, and so we are squashing these sentences, these syllables together in the grammar words. Now, why is this useful and why is this helpful? Well, in most languages around the world, this does not happen. In most languages around the world, the syllables are almost equal in length. Let's have a look at Turkish. Now, I'm going to keep the sentence as an English sentence. I know that this is not Turkish, but the fun thing about Google Translate is that you can select the language, but you can put in any other language, and it says that sentence, but in the accent of that language you've chosen. So I've chosen Turkish. I want this to be spoken out with a Turkish accent. Now let's see. Turkish is a syllable timed language, not like English, which is a stressed timed language. So let's listen.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
He looked as if he was going to cry. Do you notice each syllable is almost equal in length compared to English, which is?
He looked as if he was going to cry.
Now, do you notice the difference? Now, this is a big problem then for anybody who speaks Turkish, going from the syllable timed language to a stress timed language like English, where some syllables are squashed together, can be quite difficult. And the problem is made even worse in a listening test. You've got the stress of being in a test in the IELTS exam, plus they're speaking quite quickly. It might be part 3 of the listening, and they're squashing some of the syllables together. It can be very difficult to hear the important words. Okay, so let's have a look at this visually. You've heard it. Now let's look at it in a visual context. So over here we've got syllable timed languages. Examples are Turkish, Spanish, Italian, and you'll see that the syllables are almost equal in length. Going to cry, going to cry. But over here we've got the stress time languages like English, where the important syllables are almost equal in length, but then the weak forms are shorter. And these are, in this little diagram, they are highlighted by this lighter blue. So he looked as if he was going to, and then cry. So he looked as if he was going to cry. Okay. Now, what sound actually happens in these cases? I don't say as if, I don't say as if. Why? Because first of all, it's difficult to do that. It actually sounds as if, not as if, as if. Why do we reduce the vowels? This is the word to reduce is what I'm going to be showing you here in the next slide over here. So we've got this is from the individual sounds on my website that we looked at last time, and we've got these words as and if, was, and let's just do to. So as if, was, and to. Now if I put this word by itself, if I read it out from the dictionary, it would be pronounced as, as. So if we go over here, it's this one.
Cat.
Cat, as. This one over here, if it was by itself, it would be pronounced if. It's like fish.
Fish.
If. This one over here, was by itself. It's actually this one here. Where am I looking at? Clock.
Clock.
Was. Clock. Was. And over here, to. This is more like this one.
Boot.
Except without the two little dots. The two little dots make the sound longer. So if we imagine that those two little dots have been removed, it becomes boot, to. But really what happens to those sounds when they get reduced, this is a linguistic term, it doesn't have the same meaning in normal English. What happens when these sounds get reduced is that they all revert to this little magical sound here. Listen to it.
Computer.
The last syllable of the word computer.
Computer.
And this has got a special name. It's the only phonemic sound that from all of these that has a special name, and it's called the schwa. And schwa, I think it's Hebrew. It means nothingness. And why is it called the schwa? Why is it got the word nothingness attached to it? It's because it's the only sound that we can make where we don't have to move our tongue, we don't have to move our lips, we don't have to constrict our throat. We just go It's a very lazy sound. So it's not if, it's if. It's not was, it's was. It's not to, it's to. Okay, and they all reduce down to this little symbol here, and for that reason in spoken English this is by far the most common sound in the English language. So let's practice one more time. So he looked as if he was going to cry. Okay, so let's have a look at the languages that are syllable timed and stress timed. So all of the stress timed languages are on the left. Not all of them, there are a few more. Some of the Nepalese languages, for example, over here. But the Germanic languages, with the exception of Icelandic, all sit in the stress time languages, including Farsi or Persian. Arabic's got a little star because it depends on the dialect, whether it's, I don't know which dialects are more syllable timed than others, but it does depend. Egyptian, for example, very stress timed language. Thai, Russian, and European Portuguese. Brazilian Portuguese, on the other hand, is syllable timed, like most of the rest of the world's languages. Turkish, certainly, Hindi, Bengali, most of the African languages, Spanish, French, Italian, Mandarin Chinese, and Cantonese, and then Indonesian, Tagalog, Georgian, Romanian, Armenian, and then I said Icelandic as well. And so these are just a few of them, but this list can continue going for a lot longer if I wanted to. And then you've got these unusual ones. I'm not going to try and explain to them, but explain them to you, but they're sort of halfway between stress timed and syllable timed. And Japanese is a classic example of one of those. And then some of the Dravidian languages like Telugu, and Tamil. Okay, But if you're in the more timed, you'll find it easier to get to the English. Certainly if you're in one of these groups, you'll find it easier to do what we do in the English language with the weak forms, shortening the unstressed syllables. Okay, so I hope this is of some use to you. I want you to now go back and, sorry, not this one. Go back and practice saying this sentence.
He looked as if he was going to cry.
And try to follow exactly those weakened forms along with the stressed words looked and cry, and then from now on start to notice in spoken English all those weak forms and how they get squashed together, and then the words that have meanings in and of themselves, how they get lengthened or stressed. Okay, that's useful, and I'll see you in the next section.